Aloha, mai kako. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Moana Nui podcast. My name is Moana here, and I apologize today. We had some some time zone mix-up, mostly my fault. Alika is joining us from Hawaii, and because Hawaii does not change, the time difference, sometimes confuses us. So anyway, all my fault, but I'm so happy to have him here. Alika Seki is the owner and operator of Maui Comics and Collectibles on the island of Maui. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the ups and downs of running a small business in the most expensive state in the United States. And Alika is also a co-founder of a nonprofit called Maui Comicon, where he engages with the local colleges and the community at large to incorporate educational outreach into pop culture. Alika is, I believe, he can correct me when he comes on, but I think he's the only comic book owner on the island of Maui, which is pretty amazing. And I'm sure that provides both some challenges and some advantages. So without further ado, let's welcome Alika to the podcast. Aloha, Alika.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. How are you doing?
Good. We're in here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us today on the podcast. We're really excited to have you. I know we've been trying to do this for a while, and COVID has thrown.
I've been watching your other episodes. I love the show. So
yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, when I first started it, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough content. I don't know if people are gonna be able to listen. But it's been so many people like to talk to.
I think the representation that you focus on, and with your Hawaii roots, and also you also have your roots over there. They're like, I just feel like the sky's the limit because there's such a hunger for that kind of content right now. We need a lot more of it, a lot more that's done well.
Absolutely. I mean, we are making progress. I am seeing progress. But like you said, the sky's the limit. There's so many things I want to do. I'm sure there's a lot of things a lot of us want to do, but unfortunately, so many ideas and so little time.
I found that that's a common theme among a lot of even the members of the Hawaii Comic Book Alliance, the comic book creators that kind of buoyed up, and you and pretty much everybody we meet on the scene is just so motivated and bursting with ideas, and it's like there's not enough hours in the day,
right?
And that that's when there's a true passion. Is no matter what you do, you're awake and breathing, and you're still trying to push something forward.
Absolutely. I just wanted to shout out to one of our fellow Hawaii Comic Book Alliance members, DJ Kiavikane, who's watching today. He said, "What's up, Alika?"
DJ's a man. Yeah, on the intro when you said I was the only comic book store. Now that was true when I first opened. I was the first comic store in a decade. For 10 years, we didn't have a comic store on Maui.
Okay.
Well, 2 years into it, another store opened up in Lahaina called Game Over Comics, and they were great guys, Chris and Aaron. Unfortunately, once COVID hit about that time. I don't know if it was timed with COVID because of COVID, or, I know that they were dealing with other things, but they ended up closing their brick and mortar store and stopped carrying new comics. They exist as a business, and they do pop-up sales and stuff. They still sell pops and collectibles and comics and things like that. And I think they even hold a D&D group. I'm not sure if they've been meeting during the pandemic. I doubt it, but they still exist, but they're no longer a brick and mortar store. So I'm back to being the only brick and mortar comic store on Maui again. So I just had to add that to make sure everybody knew about Game Over Comics as well, who are great guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we're all a community, right? So it's always good when we have multiple businesses to support and more resources amongst us.
on Maui, it's just so hard because I'm centrally located because I feel like everybody can get there. But Lahaina is like this, it's like another island, The people, if you don't live in Lahaina, you go there maybe once a year.
It's true.
So,
Tourist Central.
Yeah. So, Chris and Aaron were doing a great job of serving that area, but unfortunately, the brick and mortar store closed. So it's back to square one.
Yeah. I guess because they are, so it's like a plus and a minus, right? It's good because it's when it's regular times, you have a lot of tourists that come there and I'm sure have great interest in comics and staying up to speed even while they're on vacation. Yeah. But unfortunately, when that drops, when we had the quarantine and everything, of course that means their clientele are gone. So
yeah. Although I will say that, especially in my experience, and I'm sure in Chris and Aaron's, and no hard feelings, but a couple of my customers are from Lahaina. So when Chris and Aaron opened, they migrated over there, and I was perfectly fine with it. I was happy because, it costs these people less. They don't have to make a trip to town to get their comics. But it's just, I think they being in Lahaina might have depended more on tourists than I had. Although I had really great tourist-based business and customers, but we have a really strong local core, which has been helping me get through this pandemic. Like we cut down a lot of expenses. We went into like hibernation mode, and the income we get from our regular customers, our subscribers, is kind of sustaining us through this. And it's actually making me kind of rethink our business model once things even return back to normal. So it's been a good reset for my business. I hate to say it because it's such a hardship for a lot of businesses out there, but it was a reset that we were able to survive, thankfully, and we learned a lot from it.
Yeah, that's great. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask, because I know for a lot of businesses, it's been really hard, particularly ones that are, I guess I would say entertainment based, right? Like that require people to be out and about.
Yeah. I know a lot of musicians, poor things, man. Like there was actual legal restrictions on performing live, so it's like, I know that DJ was doing the smart thing a lot of performers do, is doing online performances for Twitch does. And so, I hope that was helping a lot of musicians. I know it's nowhere near as good as gig money, but, I hope everybody's trying to find an angle to get by, and it's hard with so many safety restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you think there's opportunity for, like, just because you brought it up, like DJ, looking for gigs? Have you thought about like how you can position yourself, like Maui Comics bringing together, whether it be creators or musicians, like to kind of collaborate together online, like similar to how we would do in person, or is that something that you have bandwidth to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of interesting things are happening. People, of course, are more open to tuning into those kind of things because that's the only game in town now. They can't like go see live music very much or at all. There's been like so few since everything started. And it's interesting you said that because our stores moved a lot in the last few years. We've had a lot of shakeups. We were in the mall last year, which is a great location, and it put us, very central and easy to find, and it was a large space, but it also cost a little more money than we were making in the space. We weren't necessarily justified in having it. I wish we could have stayed there. It was a beautiful space. Everything about it was great, but the downside was we couldn't necessarily afford it, and we ended up, before the pandemic even happened, and it seemed like bad luck, but now it's definitely, in hindsight, very good luck. We moved over to Request Music up in Wailuku on North Market Street. And we're inside people know Request Music in Wailuku is the only record store on Maui now. And it's a dinosaur, old record stores, you can look at vinyl and hard media in person. Nobody does hard media anymore. So we're kind of a perfect match because and they have music shows. They're actually going to have I think the Lamonts are going to be playing. I don't know if it's at Request, but they've been trying to bring back a little bit of live music, and I think we're going to have to incorporate that live aspect, that that streaming aspect to live performances, because you can only have so many people in the venue,
right?
So you can't really make that the money you used to on that. So it's interesting because now that I'm in Request Music, and so back to that, had I not moved into Request Music, had I stayed in the mall and the pandemic hit, and we weren't allowed to be open while having to pay the mall's rent, Maui Comics would not exist right now. So that's why I'm saying, it's, in hindsight, it was very lucky that we had to move and go to Request Music, because Request it's been like a very warm, nurturing spot for us to recoup and lick our wounds. Even if COVID had not happened, Joe Alouetta, the owner of Request Music, is so nurturing. He's a businessman and he knows, but he's also a comic lover. And he's very supportive of the store and gives us terms that are fair, that help us survive this thing. So if not for Joe Alouetta at Request Music, Maui Comics would be done for. So we're limping on into the future because of him. And something interesting about that, and I've said it elsewhere before, but Joe, when I was a kid, he had a little comic store called Joe's Comic Corner. And it was the same situation where he was in another store. He was in a store called Annie's Bookstop, right across Main Street in Wailuku, pretty much diagonally from where Request Music is now. Mm-hmm. And I, as a kid, went there and shopped. I bought the X-Men #1. That's the store I bought my X-Men #1 at, and my Sabretooth #1. So that was the era that he was selling comics. And so I didn't realize this until after I moved in, and I was like, wait a minute, you own Joe's Comics. No wonder why you were so cool with moving me into your, because I thought it was too easy. I asked him, he's like, okay. I was like, I thought it would be harder than that.
That's such a cool story, because it's full circle, right? This is kind of your origin and you're going back, and now you guys are able to collaborate together. When things work out like that, where it's just too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence, it's like he was so cool with selling comics when we were kids. A lot of people also remember Perry. Perry's the main guy who was under the bridge down the hill, right above where the bowling alley once was, which is now self-storage, right above Baldwin High. There's Perry's Complete Comics, and that was there for 20, 30 years or whatever, however many years I was there. It was 80-something to 2005, I think, was the lifespan of that store. And a lot of people remember him, and that was my regular store. But I always would go up to Joe's Comics. I would make my dad, in the 90s, Maui had 5 comic stores. I would make my dad every weekend take me on an island-wide tour to every comic store. And he would do it because he was a collector too. His friends owned card stores, which surprisingly outnumbered comic stores in the 90s. Yes. My dad's friend had one in the Wailuku Industrial, and he would give me the Marvel cards, full boxes of them, because he only wanted the sports cards. So he didn't care about the comic cards. So that's where I would get those and, borrow them. But we would, there was a comic store in Lahaina in the Wharf. It was a stamp and collectible store, but they also sold comics. And I didn't know about this one in Kihei. Apparently there was one in Kihei next to the arcade. I didn't know about that one. There was Future Treasures, which was near the Warehouse Fun Factory in Kahului. Oh, Fun Factory.
Yeah, everybody was at that Fun Factory. So I'm pretty sure that comic store did pretty well. It wasn't a comic store mainly. It was a sports cards and memorabilia, but they added comics later on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Miyako Sushi, everybody remembers the sports cards and whatever. But he also did a little bit of comics. And then Joe's Comics and Complete Comics. But there was also one that lasted 1 year that was on Wakea Street at the end, where right across from Ford or Toyota, I think, or whatever, right at the intersection with the highway. But they lasted 1 year and they had new comics. I remember what year it was. It was the year Clandestine #1 on Marvel. That was selling in their store. That's what I remember about them. But they painted the whole thing black, and it was just a couple racks and a couple young guys. But they only lasted about a year. And then, all the stores closed and only Perry was left.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you've been, like, of course, as a collector, following the journey of these comic book stores. What advice, would you have for someone who might be considering opening a comic book shop? Or I have a friend who actually just opened one in Alabama. So do you have any sage advice to offer comic book owners?
Real advice? So the best advice I got from Chuck Rosansky, the owner of Mile High Comics, did an essay series, a 10-part or probably longer now, essay series on how to open a comic store. And the first 7 essays are all about the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing about logistics until you get to the 8th or 9th essay. But it's imperative you read that mindset stuff, because you got to remember, you're not opening a store and it's now your trough of comics where you're feeding at, and you're the hungry hippo collector. You are no longer, if you open a comic store, you can no longer be a collector. You are now a different person. You're a retailer, and your job is to serve that community. You can't undercut that community or the store at your own benefit. And so that was a big piece of advice that I really took to heart. When I opened my store, I flushed my collection into the store. I basically sold a lot of my most prized comics to keep the store going and pay the bills and things like that. And it was, it was painful for me. I'm not 100% emotionally prepared to not be a collector, but I had to mentally prepare myself for that. So that's one thing, is if someone wants to buy it, sell it. Don't ever hold on to something. If you're a store, don't do that. There's nothing good that can come of that. And then, the practical thing that I learned as being a retailer, because you're essentially a diamond franchisee, is that your invoices come on a weekly basis. So from the second you receive your first shipment on, you better have a game plan to keep those bills paid, because the bills don't stop. They don't take a break. They don't hold up or anything. And so you hit the ground running. So make sure. I did not have a big chunk of change saved up when I opened the store. I just took the bare minimum, opened my store, and I had to hit the ground running, paying invoices out of my income for the store, which is not a good way to do it, because you're always fighting against time. Am I going to be able to make this invoice and this and that? So my advice would be, have at least 3 months ready for prepaid for your invoices to give yourself that leeway. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but you'll thank yourself. And then, and then it's just just be open-minded and be supportive. And it's, you have to love comics. It's not a business venture. It's something that you have to be passionate about to serve the community well. That you actually love the medium and you love the material, and you don't have to necessarily actually like everything. You don't have to be but don't be the comic guy either from The Simpsons. Don't be ugh, who would read that? It's there's a comic for everybody. You can't snob on anything,
Yeah, absolutely. The community is everything, right? And I feel like a lot of that is definitely true. Whether you are a comic creator, any type of business venture that you're embarking into, you have to be passionate about it. And yes, money is a big part of it, but that can't be the only thing. Otherwise, you're just gonna.
Well, so I have a job. Aside from doing comics, this is not my only gig. I am a civil engineer. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and so I do pretty good with that work, and it gave me the freedom in my life to pursue a passion, which was comics. There's just something echoing and nagging about art and culture and literature and comics, of course, that when I'm near it, when I'm around it, when I'm surrounded by it, it just I feel better, And so the store the fact that it exists makes me feel better. And I don't if anybody ever ends up buying my store from me or opening another store and my store closes, I would gladly patronize their store. Just the fact that Maui has a comic store is just something I think is necessary. And I'm happy to be that person for now. I don't think I hold a monopoly on that. Like when Game Over Comics opened up, you know, I was pretty happy to share the, you know, the community and things like, and the duty and things like that. And they were great. They were great in supporting the community too. So that kind of thing is important to me, that as long as we have like a community oriented comic shop that knows its role in the community and what they're doing and what people value in it, I think that's important. But yeah, I have my engineering work, so like the comic store could close and nobody should ever feel bad for me. I'm fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because not everybody's in that situation, right? Like some people go into it and they put all their eggs in that basket, and ooh, that's a heavy basket.
And that's, I have a friend in New England who has a pretty well-known comic store called Comics and More in East Hampton. And that is his only gig, is the comic store. And so when there's ups and downs, you can see it, you know, the stress wears on him. And the ups and downs wear on me too. Not to say that they don't, but I have a different, it's not going to affect me as much as it might affect him if there's a market crash and all comic stores have to close, you know? Right. So I definitely feel for people who are dependent on their comic store for, as their main gig.
Absolutely. So do you think there are any challenges like that you have unique to operating in Maui that like mainland shops might not have to deal with?
I like how you put it that way, because like the two main problems that any comic store in the world, I'm just gonna put money on it right now, is their diamond invoice, which is, you know, your weekly, your products and whatever getting in the store, and rent, how much it costs to like be in your unit or whatever. And both of those things cost more in Hawaii. Diamond has a distribution network. Their distribution network ends at Oahu, meaning that I still have to pay to ship my comics from Oahu to me. I pay additional shipping on top of what everybody else, they pay their LTL and their freight as part of their diamond invoice. I actually have to pay another company, Expeditors, who are excellent, by the way. They're great, to bring my comics from Oahu to me. That means not only do I not get my comics on Tuesday, meaning I'm opening the boxes on Wednesday and sorting them out, meaning that I can't even meet street dates for my customers. They have to show me understanding. And I try to get them sorted out so that late in the day, Wednesday, they can get their comics.
Right.
But probably the only other stores that deal with this are maybe Alaska, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And I have another friend in Big Island, Enjoy Comics, Mike Sato. You're probably familiar with him. And so me and him are in the same boat. We get our comics later than anybody else in the country, and we have to pay more to get them. And then, so that's, the invoices, and that's a unique challenge. But we also have to deal with our rent being so high in Hawaii. There's no cheap rent anywhere on Maui. Maui is like premium retail. I think in the 2008 housing crash, the prices went down for like a couple months, and then they bounced back like rubber. It was crazy. There's like, the prices don't stay low in Maui ever for long.
That's so interesting. I didn't even realize that about the shipping costs. I mean, I know like Hawaii is just messed up because, well, we're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? So a lot of benefits that people on continental US have, as a business, are not enjoyed by businesses in Hawaii.
When you're talking about shipping and distribution, like mainland people will never know how much of a bum out it is when it says no shipping to Alaska and Hawaii.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for showing me this awesome thing I can't have.
Yeah.
And to Diamond's credit, they get the comics to Oahu.
Right.
On that distribution network. So there are I think there's about 10 stores. Now there's about 2 less because Collectors Maniacs and Geckos on Oahu both closed down recently. So, but there's still, I'm willing to wager almost 10, maybe like 7 or 8 comic stores on Oahu. So they get the benefit from that. They can just go pick up their comics and pay the diamond freight, and they don't have to pay any more, But outer islands, Maui, Big Island, we're definitely paying for it.
Yeah. It's funny because that's, some people have asked, why don't you move home? And I'm always like, well, number one, it's so expensive. And number two, like running a business would cost me even more,
It's insanity running a bit. And it's, local people we come from, even our direct, parents and grandparents, that's plantation days, man. Those people hustle. That's workers. That's the workers of the workers, man. They make the world go round. So
right.
people in Hawaii have a work ethic, and a lot of people have a side hustle. You work at Maui Electric, but you do plate lunches on the side, or it's like people here know how to make money, and they have the energy and the work ethic and the wherewithal to do it. So it's very impressive. Like everybody's a multitasker here.
Oh, absolutely. I take that, even though I'm not there now. I'm like the queen of multitasking.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least you might be able to save some money out there. Things are a little cheaper.
That is true. Yes. Absolutely. So, with understanding that part, does that provide any unique advantages to working? So, like, I know sometimes working with independent creators or publishers can be, a little challenging for comic book shops for various reasons. Does that, the shipping thing weigh into your decisions about like what indie books you carry and who you work with there?
Thanks to United States Postal Service flat rate shipping, I think that has done a lot to level the playing field. I use the Postal Service flat rate shipping for my comic needs. If an indie creator is sending me stuff, I have them do it. Comics Wellspring and other, first of all, I carry mostly just local stuff to kind of skirt that. If you walk into my store, the indie stuff you're seeing is homegrown, is like, Oahu, Big Island, Maui, but local stuff. It's local. And so I don't have to worry about the shipping on that. They have to worry about the shipping on getting the product here because it's not printed on island, but that's a different story.
Right.
But when I deal with a mainland creator or people who are based out of the mainland, like I bought some goods from you guys shipped it to me flat rate USPS, and that kind of made it affordable, right? It didn't really bump the price up on me. And there's a couple other, trusted partners I was dealing with. He just did the Treble Within. It's on its issue 3, and I thought it was a great idea. It's a Sonic-based superpower character, and he's a DJ. And his name, I'm trying to remember his name, but it's Antoine. But the book is great. It's called Rhythm: The Treble Within, and we have issue 1 and 2, and they just came out with issue 3, and they published that through Comics Wellspring or Kaboom or something like that, one of those indie printers. And okay. I contacted the printer directly, and I told them, hey, can you just mail me this USPS flat rate so I don't get overcharged? And they did it. They were super cool about it. So that's my solution for indie stuff is U.S. Postal Service flat rate should help us out. And so I love the Postal Service. They make participating in the global economy so much easier for a store like mine, for especially being in Hawaii.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very grateful too. When I started the clothing side of my business, I couldn't, survive without the Postal Service, that's for sure. So thank you, postal workers.
Yes, thank you
we appreciate you. We know y'all going through some stuff right now.
Yeah.
So let's see. A question that we had from someone. So what's your take? How well do you think comic shops at large will survive the pandemic and this depression?
Man, I mean, the writing was on the wall before the pandemic that there was so much going on in the industry that was troublesome, kind of affecting people's livelihoods. Comic stores were already closing by the bunches. There's still some opening them up to the passion. That's the weird thing is this is a hot take. People tend to not agree with me on it. They get mad at me when I say it, but I blame Diamond. Diamond is a monopoly. They owned the market for over 20 years by themselves and did nothing to grow it. It essentially stayed the same size for 20 years. There's no innovation when you're a monopoly. There's no,
Yeah.
you know, there are so many things that people who love comics, like myself, I've got 30 ideas ready to just pop off at the mouth to tell you how to expand the comic industry, none of which will get put into practice because there's a monopoly at the helm right now. So it doesn't even make sense to even, we all know what needs to be done. Comics need to be affordable. They need to be cheaper to make. They need to be cheaper to get in. There needs to be different terms of distribution. When Borders can't carry new comics anymore, that means there's something wrong with you, Diamond. Not wrong with Borders. There's something wrong with you. You know, Diamond is not easy to deal with. That's why comic stores are essentially Diamond franchisees, because that's the only place that mainstream comics come from is Diamond right now. And so, and, you know, DC jumped ship on them.
Yeah.
And I, you know, not that they're doing any good things for the industry. I don't think they should be praised for what they are doing. But it is good to see that they cost Diamond a part of the market share and woke them up to the reality that the industry has to change. And if the mainstreamers aren't going to be doing the changing, there's a lot of innovation at the indie level, and everybody at the indie level is ready to step up and take over. We don't care. We don't, you know, if Marvel's not going to respect, representation, or if they are not going to do the things that are needed of them to cater to the young adult market, you know, like, to DC's credit, as many problems as they have, and there's been a lot of bombshells coming out in the past weeks about that, and I'm not addressing that, but they are leaning heavily into the young adult market. They sell a lot of graphic novels, not through Diamond, but through Penguin, right? They don't even use Diamond as a distributor, because Diamond is basically, it's the bottle city of Candor. It's just sitting there. It's not getting any bigger. It's not thriving. It's just sitting there in a bottle, you know, and that's the comic industry right now. It's in a bottle, and they're the walls we can't get out, and everybody thinks they're going to die if they leave. But what I see is comic stores are innovating. If you go to a store like Copacetic Comics, they don't even carry Diamond Comics. They scoff at Diamond Comics. Okay, there's no Marvel and DC in their store, but their store is all comics and books and graphic novels. You know why? It's because there's a world of comics out there that isn't Diamond distributed comics. You know, we just feel the pressure to get there because they have the biggest distribution network.
Right.
But innovation has happened in distribution. Amazon, and I hate using them as a positive because Amazon also sucks, but they're a distribution alternative. They have, you know, there's enough innovation we're in the future where there's enough distribution infrastructure that somebody else could take over the game if they wanted to, that if they were really motivated, if they were really organized, could do something to upset the balance. And I think that needs to happen. So COVID, you know, was a massive pressure test of all this crap that was already going wrong. And so a lot of stores just had to close. Obviously, comics are a luxury item. That's another piece of advice for comic store owners. Don't ever, ever have the illusion that people need comics. They're a luxury item. They're the first thing to go. If a family's going to starve, don't expect them to pick comics over groceries. And this is my number one advice, don't be mad about it. I see comic store owners shaming people for leaving subscription points in their boxes. And from day one, I have always had a distaste for this. We will never do this to anybody. If you have a subscription pull that you haven't picked up in a long time, you know, and we were still pulling for it, and you come back and you're like, I'm sorry, I can't do all this. I can't get all these comics. It's understood. These are luxury items. I'm the one who chose to run a business based on luxury items that are not essential to your life. That I don't want to shame people and make them feel bad because they wanted to pull comics, because at one time they were a supporter of my store and they were a customer. And I hope that someday when they're able to, they can come back as a customer. But I don't think they can do coming back if I go and shame them publicly and be like, this is my pull. It's worth this much money. I could have got this much money if you bought it. It's like, yeah, if he bought that much comics during a global pandemic, don't don't shame your customers. Don't do pull box shaming. That's the number one thing. And that's also a hot take of mine. People don't, comic store owners don't like when I say that because you see the comics in the box and you get mad. You're like, well, if this guy bought it, I'd have hundreds of dollars right here. I'd be able to pay this bill. But you got to think about it a couple steps further about what you're doing when you're shaming that person for not picking up that pull. Is like they might not be able to afford it. They may be getting evicted. And then you go and make a Facebook post about not picking up the pulls. Yeah, way to go, guy. You're a real hero, you know?
I love this perspective. It's such a fresh perspective because I am
the only comic store saying this, and I hope it catches on. But I'm sorry to all the comic stores who've done this in the past. There's time to atone. I'm not mad at you. Just I understand why you did it, but don't do it. These people love comics, and they want to love you. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I get it, right? Like being a business owner, you have expenses to pay, but shaming those customers and, that's not you have to think about that long-term relationship, like
you're like going through a community. You're part of the community, Yeah. If your auntie borrows money from you and owes you money, are you going to walk over there with somebody to break her legs? No. You're like, okay, auntie, whatever. I know things are hard. Just take your time, whatever. Right. Think about it. You're in a community. You're part of a community.
That's so true. And I feel like that's kind of weeding out, the ones that are in it for the wrong reasons, that are focused on only the profit, right? And forget about the community.
And, as a business person, that's why I say I understand. You need to focus on the bottom line. That's not something you can totally ignore. I'm not like in this imaginary world where money doesn't exist and we don't need to keep it flowing to make a business work. But at the same time, you need to understand what business you're in. And it is very community-based. You can't be like harming the community while you believe you're helping it,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, earlier you brought up innovation, and that's definitely important. Like, how can you think out of the box about how to, maybe you're suffering with your ongoing customers, right? But how can I attract new customers to this? How do you separate yourself from, other comic book shops? I follow Jesse James Comics in Arizona.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
He's amazing. He set up this whole, thing on Facebook, and he's brought in comic book shops and giving them opportunities to get in front of people and built up this it's shared, right? It's not like everybody's like, no, buy from me only. No, it's like comics, right? Like comic book shops have only so many copies, and so like the popular books, you'll see like, oh crap, this guy, damn, I missed out over there. Okay, I'm gonna check out this show, and it's just more opportunities for you to build up that relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like goes back to when I was a kid. Variety is the spice of life, man. Yeah. It's like I love comics. I love every store that was ever open. They all have something about them that I like, And it's like, just be grateful there's comic stores.
Absolutely.
I'm stoked there's so many, and they're innovating. You're right. There's so many of them innovating right now. That's maybe I might steal a good idea here and there. I don't know.
That's right. So before, let's see, we have about 15 minutes left. Can we talk a little bit about Maui Comicon and the work that you guys are doing with the local community there?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first opened the store, I was just naturally, there were comic conventions already happening on Oahu. There was Amazing. There's Comic-Con Honolulu.
Yeah.
Big events. There's a lot of people. There's 10 times the people on Oahu that there are on Maui. But it's so cost restrictive. Even if the events didn't cost money, which they do. So once you get over there, you've also got to pay to get in and everything. Mm-hmm. But to fly over there, and a convention is a family affair. So you're flying with your family, you're putting your family up for room and board, you're eating meals out because you're not in your home area. And it's expensive. It's an expensive thing for an outer island people. And so I was just like, we need to get some of that action on Maui. We need to
Mm-hmm.
bring in some big name artists. We need to create a forum for our local artists. We need to get our collectibles vendors, which we know exist because the swap meet, and we just, in the community have made many retail partners, guys who are like private sellers and stuff like that. They exist, and so we just I knew that a convention in some form should happen, and I had been sketching up notes, and then a lot of regulars at the store. My friend Ken Gardner was the co-founder of the comic convention, and he was pretty proactive about it. He was working at the time in Lahaina Cannery Mall, and he was speaking with the management, and he approached them. The management was super cool and open because the mall was not doing well business-wise. And Ken said, just asked them straight out of the blue, "Hey, can we have a comic convention here?" And they said yes. And so he comes back to me, and he's like, "Hey, these guys said we can have a convention." It's and it's like June or July at this point, and they said it in October, and I was like, "Holy crap!" So in 3 months, we planned a convention, and DJ Cavalcante in the chat is one of the big reasons we had a great headliner. We got 2 great headliners out of it, actually. We got Steve Lealoha, which is actually his uncle. He met him at his family reunion. And I remember him telling me that story, and I'm like, "Hey, DJ, you think you can get Uncle Steve out here?" And then I did not know this, and shame on me for not really knowing much about Trina Robbins before she came. But she is Steve Lealoha's partner, and she was communicating with me, and I'm embarrassed to say I wasn't familiar with her career. It's actually, she's a pioneer in comics from the 70s on, and she was part of even the fashion scene in San Francisco in the 60s, which is huge because that's where a lot of rock and roll, and she has a lot of history with rock and roll stars from that time period, and she's an icon in herself. So I'm just so grateful that she was very forgiving with me not knowing who she was initially, and educating me on her career and who she was. And she was a special treat to have that first year. And also we had a Disney artist, James Silvani, who's also a board member of the convention. And he brought out a couple of guests who also worked on Darkwing Duck, which Aaron Sparrow was the writer of the comics at the time, and Tad Stone's the creator of Darkwing Duck, which what an amazing lineup. We were so lucked out at having that headlining. And then the Hawaii Comic Book Alliance, at the drop of a hat, they were out here. And we had a huge, robust artist alley. And then all the vendors came out and we're having a great time. And it was magic. I cannot believe it was just such a beautiful thing. The first Maui Comicon, it came together in 3 months. Everybody put hands on it and everybody held it up and made it this beautiful, awesome thing for the community. And we were just like, this is great. This went better than we ever thought it could have gone. So let's just keep doing it. And, eventually James Silvani's wife, who's a lawyer, helped us form the Maui Comic Con as a nonprofit. And so in 2018, the convention was formed as a nonprofit. 2019, which was last year's convention, was the first year we actually were fully operational as a nonprofit while the convention was happening. So it's been great. I mean, it's been getting better. We've just been kind of improving on the theme. It's kind of like making a stew. We know all the ingredients we want, and it just gets better over time. We want local artists to come in and display their stuff. We want local vendors to come and sell their stuff. We want to have a giant cosplay competition, which, is actually larger than the conventions on Oahu. Our judge, the organizer, Night Darling, Lindsay Kyocho, who's a well-known cosplayer in Hawaii, she organized the convention from year one, and that's why we call it the Night Darling Cosplay Competition, because that's totally her baby. She organized it. She did everything, the rules, the prizes. She just made it happen. She made magic happen. And the Night Darling Cosplay Competition is the largest cosplay competition in Hawaii right now. And so, we're talking about the future of that too, and trying to make things work with that. There's another cosplay competition on Maui also, which is actually a huge one too, for the Maui Matsuri, which is the Japanese cultural celebration. And yeah, so there's multiple cosplayers here on Maui to support that kind of scene, which is awesome. It's very healthy competition. A lot of, they bring it, man. Maui cosplayers are great. And they don't have to fly out to outer islands to compete anymore. It's funny, other conventions, as a prize, will give free tickets to their convention, as well as entry into their cosplay competition for anybody who wins the Maui Comic Con cosplay competition. So it just goes to show you what kind of action Maui can bring in, and what kind of things our convention and these islands can do if we work together. And that's why I'm so grateful to be part of the Hawaii community at large. When we go to Oahu, people are just so aloha and so like they see the Maui guys and they're super nice to us and stoked on us and loving and welcoming, and everybody's so open and they share, and it just makes me have so much hope for everything that's going on in Hawaii. Is that if something goes down, if we need like boots on the ground, that everybody in Hawaii is ready to form up like Voltron and just you know what I mean?
Yes.
We're all waiting for this big moment to happen where, our time has come, and it's soon enough because there's so much talent here, pure talent, just so much talent in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I'm from Hawaii, you guys are from Hawaii, the talent goes outward, and, I'm hearing all this stuff on the mainland happening that wasn't there. I lived in Boston for a while. Okay. And, a lot of this cultural stuff that, living in the mainland was different from Hawaii, because Hawaii is like going to 30 different countries at once. Yeah. You got like the Filipino food and the Hawaiian food and the Portuguese food and like whatever is everything all over the place. And you go to the mainland and you got to go to like Chinatown to get something.
Right.
But now Filipino food is like this big culinary craze, or so I've heard. I was like reading articles in the mainland. I was like, I kind of wish I was there for that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is a little bit on the come up. So, but it's still nowhere near home. I mean, and I'm kind of a snob when it comes to some of the food too, especially for all these places that are like popping up with Pokeballs. I'm like, that's not a Pokeball. That's a vegetable bowl.
Yeah, don't get me started on the Pokeballs. I have friends in New York City, right? There's all these poke restaurants opening in the city and stuff. And then they had that Aloha Poke
right.
For that whole debacle.
Yeah.
And you look at the videos of what they do for poke, and they have like such a waste of fish. They're like, it's like, it looks like soup with fish chunks in it. And it's like, oh, nasty, man. Like, you're just like, poke is not hard to make either. It's not a difficult dish, but for some reason they feel the need to mess with it or not follow instructions. I mean, Sam Choi's cookbook is there. All you got to do is just open Sam Choi's cookbook. Boom, poke, you got it. That's it.
That's what I'm saying. Keep it simple, brah. Hello. Fish. Show you.
Boom. Mona. Onion. Whatever, man. There's only a handful of things that work with poke.
That's so true. Yeah, all these vegetable bowls, I cannot. And they want to charge like $20. I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah, I saw corn in one of them. I was like, what the frick is this? What is this, hollow?
I'm surprised they didn't put pineapple, because, if you put pineapple, automatically it's Hawaiian, right? Yeah, right.
It's so terrible.
Yeah. The culture shock for sure. Living in Hawaii and coming over here. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you were in Boston for a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure it's for Hawaiians, it's probably no better in the mainland now than it ever was. I don't think there was ever proper education or representation for obvious reasons too. I think, people in the mainland have a stake in keeping Hawaii commoditized and, and claiming a monopoly on a culture they don't understand and things like that. I think it serves them. So it's important to be conscious of these kind of things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of one thing that I've been, kind of more humble about before in the future, because it's kind of like what how we are in Hawaii, right? Like we don't brag about the things that we do and things like that. But every time somebody finds out you're from Hawaii, then they want to go on their tourist story, right? Like, I was there and la la la, I did this, I did that, and it was great, And so I met this lady. I think she was in my doctor's office or something. She went on her thing. And I kind of flipped it on her, and I was like, well, but do you understand, like, I'm happy that you had your great vacation and it's beautiful, but do you understand, like, what is actually going on in Hawaii and how the people there are actually suffering under this? And she's like, but what about the job market? And I said, people love to sit on that crutch. However, if you really...
I think that's probably the worst thing I hear when people from the mainland talk about, oh, but our tourism dollars support your life. And it's like, we don't want to depend on that money. That's the other reason why I support art and artists, because those are people by their own hand making money, and they don't need tourism to do it. It's not a service industry. It's, it's a skilled labor. And I'm a huge proponent of that. I'm a civil engineer, right? Mm-hmm. I started as a young person, as a draftsperson. I learned a trade very young. And so I think that's something that Hawaii is lacking, is trade schools.
Oh, yeah.
And appropriate college infrastructure. I'm not saying that UH is not a great school. It's a good school. But there's no surveying or engineering classes for me to take on Maui. Yes. I happen to know there are plenty of talented people here, young people, middle-aged people who, if they had that kind of education, could further their careers and support their families, create industries of their own,
Absolutely.
And so I'm a huge proponent of education. I think that things need to, I think that the Maui campus of University of Hawaii is underused. It's a great facility. I think a lot more could be happening there. I think we need better programs. I think we need more technical programs. Not just these intro to graphic design or something that's high level, because the other messed up thing is all these high level people live here.
Yes.
They get rich. They get rich, Silicon Valley people, and they get a house in Maui, or they live here part of the year. Take advantage of those people. You want those people to prove that they care about this community, then give back. Teach us how to do what you do and make the money that you make. That's how you set Hawaii free, is give us the skills and, the infrastructure and the ability to, like, there was a time in the 90s when they were really pushing tech hard. Imagine if there are many reasons why it didn't take. I don't blame, anybody or the locals or anything. But the educational infrastructure here needs to catch up. We need to be able to compete.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally on board with you. It's one of the big reasons why I wanted to take that adventure on, writing books and providing resources to our educational system, which is severely in need. And, anything we can do to further improve in the trades as well as in STEM, because our people, it may not fall under the definition of STEM now, but navigation, STEM all over.
I think global culture is starting to become aware of the knowledge and the skill that was contained in a lot of indigenous thought, and there's actually academia in the indigenous world, and they don't understand that. And I think they're coming to terms with it finally, just because it doesn't look like a stuffed jacket with leather elbows and a brick and mortar building smoking a pipe at Harvard. They don't understand how to handle that. And I know that because I was a particularly gifted youth, but I'm from Hawaii, very laid back, very easygoing. So a lot of people respond in shock when they discover my
knowledge.
My knowledge base and my ability and my skills and things like that. And I find that really insulting. I'm like,
yes.
that's a disgusting way to react. So anybody out there, and I'm speaking directly to you, who's ever told me they were surprised that I was smarter than I seemed, I took that as a supreme insult, and I automatically thought you were stupider for saying it.
In short, screw you.
But I just had to put that out there. But people need to understand that there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of intelligence here in these islands, and just because it doesn't look the way that you think it should, doesn't mean you demean it or you deny it the opportunities or infrastructure that it needs to thrive. I've worked at a high level in skilled labor, in licensed professional labor, and I understand what it takes. And when I see young people not given that opportunity, when I clearly recognize the raw talent and skill in them, it disgusts me. It makes me so upset. And so, but I think that's changing. I feel like that's changing. People are coming around and realizing that being prejudicial or stereotyping or coming to a situation thinking that you know everything is not the best way to be. And I think that's definitely changing. I'm hoping that's changing.
Yes, that arrogance. I can't stand that. It's
terrible. There's no way to respond to it. Because if you respond to arrogance by saying, but I outrank you in the things that you are arrogant about, then that too is also arrogant. So you have to be arrogant to beat the arrogance, right? And it's like, it's just a losing battle. And so I just don't engage.
Agreed. Yeah. I don't engage. I just love proving people wrong. You know, I like when you tell me what I can't do. I'm like, watch me.
My existence is proof. My favorite saying is the proof is in the pudding.
Yes.
So it's like, I don't need to tell you all these things.
Right.
If you have experience with me, you will learn these things. I don't need to boast. I don't need to brag. And, and I don't need to prove anything to you. There's nothing in it. So, I'd kind of just let the proof be in the pudding.
Absolutely. That's great advice, guys. I hope you're taking this to heart. Well, it's been such a great opportunity to talk to you. I know we had other topics, and it sounds like we'll have to have a round two.
I would love to be back because the topics of Hawaiian land sovereignty and cultural rights over their land, over the Aina, those are very important things to me as well. I'm by no means an expert, but it's something I'm also very passionate about. So I don't mind talking story about it if you ever have the time again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely something I want to cover. Maybe we could even talk to Brother Keamoku Kapu and see if he'd be willing to join us.
Keamoku Kapu would be the number one guy to talk about. I love him. I love their mission. He's the founder and president of Na'aikane Maui, who's doing great things for Kanaka, getting them to hold on to their land, their Kuleana land, protect their land. And he's won court cases, multi-billion-dollar court cases against these multi-millionaires and billionaires, just to prove it. It just proves that he's right, and the Hawaiians are right to want their land sovereignty and have control over their culture and their Aina. So
absolutely,
I think if anybody has time, go look Keamoku Kapu of Na'aikane Maui. Just look them up and have a look at what they're doing. Lance Collins, who is this lawyer in the Supreme Court case, they're doing incredible things for Hawaii right now, and not just in land, but also in water rights. Lance Collins is with Isaac Moriwaki with Earth Justice, and they're the lawyers representing Hui o Nawaiʻeha, which are the waters in Wailuku. They're making sure the interim stream flow is respected, which Wailuku Water Company is not respecting, and so they're monitoring them. A lot of amazing, incredible things happening on Maui specifically, but across the islands in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a conversation I want to have. So we will happily welcome you back for round two.
Gladly. Thank you, Moana. Thank you so much.
No, mahalo nui for coming on and giving us just some of your time today. For people who want to follow you, what's the best way for them to connect with you online?
So I have the Facebook page for the store, Maui Comics and Collectibles. We have an Instagram at Maui_comics. Also for the Maui Comicon, Instagram is at Maui Comicon. Facebook is also Maui Comicon. Very easy. If you need to contact me, you can do Maui Comics and Collectibles at gmail.com. You Google it, it'll pop up. It's easy to find. But I'm pretty much only on Facebook and IG. Kind of a dinosaur that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'll just do some quick shout outs to some folks that were in the chat. Sorry, I wasn't able to keep up with all the comments, but aloha nui to DJ Kiavekane, Free Isabello,
yeah, free.
fellow members of the Hawaii Comic Book Alliance represent. D. Momilani Thomas, a good friend of mine, Newton Lilavois, creator of Crescent City Monsters, which I think you should consider in your store.
Oh, yeah, I'll check it out. You always post some amazing art, so I got to find out who these people are.
Yeah, absolutely. Keithan Jones, Tita Gloria and Pollard, Leiji Harlock, which I'm pretty sure you know.
Yeah, Amy. Yeah, she's a good friend of the store.
And Keith Cooper from Blurtish, who's provided me with my swag here.
I have been following Blurtish, so you got some cool friends, man.
Yes, I surround myself with greatness, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, for everyone who's listening, thank you guys for being here. Please give us a share, give us a thumbs up, a follow, hit the notification bell. And if you have suggestions on other guests that you would like to hear from, please drop me a note, moana@burningspearcomics.com. And we'll, take a look and see if we can bring those people on. So I think that's all for today. Again, mahalo, Alika. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. Take care, everybody. Malama pono. Wear your mask. Be good to each other. Be kind. And take care. Bye-bye.
Aloha, Moana.